stressed that, and I think it's all important to you. So most of our talks this year will center around that in one way or another, this idea of community. And I can't tell you how excited I am to hear from our first speaker, Miss Lura Stroud.
Look at me, I brought a prop. Got a blanket. Appropriate for alpaca blankets at midnight. This was it. This was how I died. He gripped one of the wool blankets wrapped up in my arms, yanking it as hard as he possibly could, and repeated an indecipherable, menacing phrase through gritted teeth. There was a mixture of desperation and anger in his eyes as he pulled on the llama printed corner, and I froze. I had just watched him physically assault another man lying in the streets, stealing his blanket, and I just knew that violence would be turned towards me next. It was dark on these downtown Lima streets at midnight, and in the chaos of the group behind me, I was sure no one was going to hear me call for help. Where was I, and how did I get here, you ask? Well, let me back up a little bit. See, just a few undisclosed years ago, I was in high school just like you. And like several of you who I have spoken to, I did not know what I wanted to do after senior year. But unlike you, I did not have a Miss Ferrario to help me figure it out. And so that senior year graduation deadline just kept approaching, and I had no idea what I was going to do. That is, until I received a random job offer that fall semester asking me to move to Peru with a family to translate with them and help them settle into the new country. So I accepted, broke my mama's heart, and moved to Peru at 18. When you land in Peru, you feel like you've landed on Mars. It's a beautiful country, and it's so connected. Oh, there I am. There's Peru. It's so connected to its ancient history. For context, this was just a few minutes from my backyard. Those are the ancient ruins of the Ichma people, a pre-Incan civilization. And we were not prohibited from walking amongst the ruins. And as you can see, there are remains of those people that you can see all around you. It's a little creepy. But Peru isn't just full of dirt mountains like the area where I lived. Beauty is everywhere, and the people of Peru are even more beautiful than the landscape. I know this very well when I worked at a children's home in Cieneguilla. Children's homes in Peru are there for the abandoned children that live on the streets. Did you know that up to 500,000 children are living on the streets of Peru, most of them abandoned by their family? This children's home was there to accept those children into the organization to save them from living on the streets. Children find themselves abandoned for many reasons. Sometimes they're abandoned due to neglect. Sometimes they're abandoned due to poverty. Sometimes they're abandoned through becoming orphans. I worked there and was able to help several children while I was there, 4 of them specifically. For privacy reasons, I can't show you their names or tell you their names or show you their faces. These are some different children that I cared for. But for 2 of them, there was a sibling group of 2 boys. One brother was found wandering the streets at 2 years old, carrying his baby brother in his arms, crying. He was found and taken to this children's home. Another sibling group had been abused, neglected, locked in one room for several years. They were saved and brought into this children's home. I don't know if you can truly tell what redemption and hope feels like when a child like this starts to call you mama after a few years, showing you what true redemption is like. Thankfully, all 4 of those boys were found, brought to this children's home, and have now been adopted to families in the United States. One is now in the U.S. military, and another one bought his first home last month. Yes, I am that old. But what would have happened to them if they had not been picked up and brought to the children's home? What would you do if your family and the social structure around you failed you, leaving you on the streets to fend for yourself? Well, I'm sorry to say, you might have ended up like that young man who was threatening me not so long ago. Growing up on the streets had made him hard. He had probably been one of those abandoned children, and he saw an opportunity to get a comfort item he liked that he probably did not already have. I know this because that night we went there specifically for that purpose, to pass out blankets to the people living on the streets, to try to give them a measure of warmth on the cold winter Lima nights. The problem was he wasn't the only man that night looking for a blanket. In this slide, you can see a group of young men on the right and a group of younger girls on the left. Several of the girls I spoke to were 11 years old, younger than all of you sitting here today. The stories are heartbreaking. Abandoned by their family and their community, they wander the streets, becoming that undesirable demographic we hear so much about. So here I was, in a group of Americans, passing out blankets and translating for them as much as possible when I saw that group of young girls. My heart went out to them, and I wanted to go to them and hand them some of the blankets that I had left. When all of a sudden, I felt that tug. What made this so scary was that this guy had already beat another man in the head a few minutes earlier, this guy, and so I knew he was very dangerous. Some of the group leaders suspected that he was high on some illicit substance, and so they escorted him away, but now he was back, and he was looking at me. After I got over my shock at him yanking on my blanket, my instincts kicked in, and I yanked back and told him, "No es para ti." For my French students in here, that means, "This is not for you." Apparently, it is a bad idea to get into a fight with a desperate, high, violent man on a deserted street in Peru at midnight. I do not advise it. He began to yank harder, and if it wasn't so dangerous, it would almost be comical. Me, a tall, blue-eyed American woman, in a tug of war with an angry, crazy-eyed Peruvian man in his 20s over an alpaca blanket with llamas printed in a geometric design. It became less funny, however, when he started shoving me and acting aggressively. I was too afraid to take my eyes off of him to even look behind me to see who could be of help, so I remained deadlocked, for some reason refusing to give him the blanket, to refuse the situation, because I wanted to give it to those girls, but also not winning that tug of war battle either. I guess I skipped arm day. I felt trapped when all of a sudden I felt two strong hands grab my elbows and started dragging me backwards. I yelled out, "Stop, let me go, help!" I just knew it was all over. Who was going to have to tell my poor mother that I died because I wouldn't give a homeless man an alpaca blanket? Not exactly what I had planned to put on my tombstone, but here we were. Thankfully, the hands were connected to a man with a familiar voice, which said, "Lura, cálmate, tienes que venir conmigo." "Lura, calm down, you have to come with me." It was my translator buddy Eric and my other friend Christian. They had seen me move from the group like a dumb teenager and followed me to bring me back to safety from my own poor choices. They shoved me onto the bus, which had already been reboarded by the rest of the group, because unbeknownst to me, that was not the only aggressive man that night. There was a group of young men who had moved in, and they were positioning themselves to get whatever was left of the stuff that we were offering, or they would take it themselves if we didn't give it to them freely. Sensing the change in the atmosphere wisely, our group leader started gathering everyone back onto the bus. Sadly, the girls I was heading towards were not close enough for me to give them the blankets, and they remained on the periphery of the angry mob that was swarming the bus. Angered at the abruptness of our departure, the crowd began beating on the outside of the bus. We were told to throw out whatever was left of the care packages and materials we were handing out, and so blankets and care packages and sandals started being catapulted through the windows to the extended hands below. Once everything was distributed, the group leader asked the driver to get us out of there quickly, and he didn't need to say it twice because he was ready to get us all to safety. As we pulled away, the angry men in the crowd threw whatever they could find at us, rocks, trash, as we quickly drove off. So what does this story have to do with our morning chat? Well, we here at O'Neill are considered to be a community. Coach Brace and others spend hours every year finding ways to help build community. They strengthen bonds between us to find ways to build each other up. And I'm sure there have been moments where you may have not wanted to sit out of kickball games. Trey is not one of them. Maybe you wanted to sit out of a relay race saying, "It's not a big deal, it's just a game." But I learned firsthand how important a community is to a person's well-being, and how devastating it can be for someone when their community fails them. And while playing in a kickball game is obviously not the same thing as saving a child from homelessness, it is the same when you look out for the people around you, seeking help from teachers and coaches when you need it, And building someone up instead of tearing them down are all habits we need to build on a daily basis today. When you can see how those skills will be able to transform you into the world changers that you can become when you leave here. And making a positive impact on the world should certainly be one of your goals when you leave here. If your main goal in life is to treat life like you play the game of Monopoly, whoever has the most cash at the end of the game wins, you have completely missed out what it means to be a human being on this planet. Believe me, every time you look into a child's eyes, a child who had, up to that point, only known need, abuse, the absence of love, when you're able to fill those roles for him or her, it's an amazing experience, and one I highly recommend. In closing, I'm not telling you to drop out of 12th grade tomorrow and move to South America to save children from homelessness, although that saving children from homelessness is a noble cause. What I am saying is that the world needs you. You have a role to fill, whether you like it or not. And you can develop the skills to fill that role well in your interactions with others today. Let's be good and in our community together. Thank you.